The Boston Bruins are currently not in a playoff spot, and all the teams that can catch them have games in hand. Now, normally, I would say there's lots of hockey left, but the Boston Bruins have been getting blown out on a regular basis. They have been outscored 13-4 in their last 2 games, and one of those was against the Buffalo Sabres. You could also say it's too early to say this, but it may be time for the Bruins to sell because they're certainly not fun to watch. In this video, I'm going to cover why I think it's time to sell for the Boston Bruins. So buckle up, Bruins fans. I'm here to give you the latest info on your beloved Boston Bruins. If you've been liking my Bruins content, please leave me a like and subscribe. If you've already done so, thank you, and let's get into it. The Boston Bruins have the second worst goal differential in the Eastern Conference with -29. The Pittsburgh Penguins hold top spot with -39, which is even crazy when I say it out loud. The finger pointing from the fan base has gotten out of hand as to why the Bruins have struggled. Each game they lose, they seem to always point to one single player. In their last loss to the Winnipeg Jets, I saw a post of Trade Lowry, who kind of scored on his own net when he tried to break out in front of his goalie. You should never do that, but kids do make mistakes. I also saw this narrative that is Brad Marchand's fault for taking a selfish penalty at the end of the second period. At the time of the penalty, the Bruins were losing the game 2-1, and the lone goal scored for the Bruins was Brad Marchand. During the penalty, the Bruins would score a shorthanded goal, but very quickly give up a power play goal right after. So it was a wash. The penalty he took didn't hurt them in any way, but what it did hurt them was their penalty kill. Now, the reason why I say the penalty didn't hurt them is because a lot of people were saying, oh, the Bruins were getting back in the game. And I know Sacco after the game was like, oh, we played a good 40 minutes. I honestly don't know what he was talking about. I felt the Winnipeg Jets owned the Bruins from start to finish. I didn't really feel at any point where I was like, yep, the Bruins are back in this one. I want to focus first on the penalty kill because have you been watching my videos? I've had a hard time just blaming one player for their loss. Unless your name is Steve Smith and it's the 1986 Smythe final, he 100% cost his team that game. The Boston Bruins currently are 25th in the league for their penalty kill. There are only 32 teams, so being that close to the worst PK in the league is unfamiliar territory for the Boston Bruins. The Bruins were once a team that consistently had one of the best PKs in the league. Their current PK sits around 75%. But have averaged over the last 10 years around 82.9, which would have them in the top 10 this year. The Boston Bruins this season have given up 41 power play goals against this season. They only gave up 47 power play goals against all of last season. We're not even at the Four Nations break yet. The number is only going to get bigger this year. The Boston Bruins have lost 22 games this season. In 80 of those games, the game-winning goal was on the power play. In 2 of those games, the game-winning goal was a shorthanded goal. The Boston Bruins special teams are costing them games at an alarming rate. Brad Marchand getting a penalty the other night sucked, but if the PK was as good as it had been in years, it wouldn't have mattered. If the Bruins had an 82% penalty kill this season, I wouldn't even be making this video. We would even be pointing figures at who cost them the game. They'd be winning more games. So what is different? The departures are Jake DeBrusk, Danton Heinen, Derek Forbort, Matt Grzelcyk, and Jacob Lauko. Only Forbort and DeBrusk and Heinen had regular shifts on the PK, but would them not being there affect them that much? It's pretty much the same coaching staff as they had last year, minus the head coach, but not much has changed on how they run the PK. You will see the same structure and system. The difference is they have a lot more new faces out there on their PK. You have a lot more players trying to learn the system, and frankly, some are having a hard time with it. In the past, the Bruins could make trades, and it was almost like they could just plug a guy in and he would just fit. This guy leaves, we plug this guy in, and it just so on and so forth. That just hasn't worked this year. And it's honestly the first year I've seen it not work. It's just usually they just find the right guys. And even this summer when they signed Zadorov and Lindholm, I truly thought, hey, these guys seem to fit perfectly. I've said this before, but sometimes players are perfect for a team system. And just some are not. I think, unfortunately, Nikita Zadorov is not the one that is right for the Bruins system. He wants to be here. The Bruins want him here. But I think it's painfully obvious that we watch him game in and game out, and he just doesn't seem to gel. Sure, he's leading the team in plus minus, but I don't even know what that means this year. He's just on the ice more in better situations. I'm not a big fan of using plus minus as a thing. He seems to struggle more than most on the PK and is more often a liability when he's on the ice than most. And I'm not saying it's only the Zadorov's fault. Trust me, I'm just pointing it out because he was here to transform and help this Bruins defense. And, since the injuries of McAvoy and Lindholm, man, a lot of his weaknesses have been painfully obvious. Elias Lindholm, on the other hand, has actually been good on the PK and wins most of his faceoffs, which allow the Bruins to gain possession. But we have seen game in and game out this year They win possession off the draw, even in the defensive zone. They have a hard time clearing the puck out of the zone. The Bruins have had dealt with a lot of injuries on their back end this year, and it hasn't helped them either. It's making it so the coaching staff has to put different defensemen in the lineup who might not be as strong defensively. The loss of Derek Forbort, though, can't be understated as well, as he was a PK specialist and someone that thrived in the Bruins system on the PK. I understand he had injuries and is not as effective, but he was one of the best Bruins penalty killers night in and night out, and he cost them kind of nothing. DeBrusk was good too. I do think, analytically, Heinen was better, but DeBrusk did play serviceably on the PK. So, you lost 3 guys that you had on your penalty kill. Now, let's look at their power play, because it isn't good either. The Bruins power play currently ranks 30th in the NHL at 14.2%. They have scored a total of 23 goals on the power play this season. Last season, they scored 54 power play goals, so they're certainly behind that pace. Over the last 10 seasons, the average power play percentage was 22%, which would put them 15th overall in the league this season. The Bruins have 3 games this season where the game-winning goal was on the power play, but they also won 12 games this season when they scored on the power play. The Bruins only have 25 wins this season, which means half their wins, their special teams, helped them win the game. The Bruins have had 162 power play opportunities so far this season, which is second in the NHL. They have only had 3 wins when the power play goal is the game winner, but have won 12 of those games when they score on the power play. I know throwing a lot of numbers out here, but it speaks to the bigger issue with this year's Boston Bruins. They're failing as a team right now, and it's costing them games because their special teams are absolutely terrible. The minus 29 goal differential is the most team stat you can find. I know a lot of people will instantly point at the goaltending, but I honestly think that is a team stat. A lot has been said about the goaltending this year, which hasn't been good consistently from either goaltender. Korpisalo has an .894 save percentage and Swayman has an .895. That is nothing to run home about. It's really just bad. Up until the last game, Korpisalo really hadn't had any starts against a huge playoff team. The Jets was his first test, and guess what? He didn't look good at all. Neither goalie can shout from the rooftops and declare themselves as the best on the Boston Bruins this year. In fact, if Korpisalo had been playing better, it would make him easier to move for a retool, but there's no chance any team is taking him. There would be a lot of teams that would take Swayman. And I know in my comments right now, there's probably a lot of people happy with that. And you know what? If you want him gone, all the power to you. I'm at this point where I'm indifferent. I don't care if he's here. I don't care if he's gone. I do, though, have serious doubts that Bruins are willing to move him right now. Like I said before, I'm indifferent. So if they do or not, because it won't change anything with this hockey club, but it will make it so I don't have to see comments about his contract anymore. Again, those comments, they're justified if you want to feel that way, because himself and Cam Neely made an absolute mockery this offseason, and it just made a mess. And I truly do think that did play a role into the beginning of the season. And a lot of people just point at Swayman. But guess what? Swayman has a lot of friends on this hockey club. So I can guarantee you the animosity towards the president of the hockey club, Cam Neely, is strong as well. So as much as you can think, oh, what Swayman did, like kind of ruined the locker room, it's a combination of both of them. Both of them are at fault here. So yes, Swayman hasn't played consistently well this season at all and doesn't look like an NHL starting goalie right now. He will string together a couple of good games in a row and then lay a stinker. The same goes for Korpisalo. He will string together a couple of good games in a row and then pull a stinker himself. The issue I see here is it doesn't matter who's in net because the same outcome continues to happen. When the Bruins lose this season, most of the time it's a blowout and an embarrassing loss. In the 18 of the Bruins losses this season, they've allowed 4 goals or more against. They have only lost 22 games this year. Remember, when I talked about the power play goals against earlier, they have had 171 goals against. Already this season, 41 of them are on the power play and 7 have been shorthanded. They can't sustain this, and based on all these stats, I can't see any way they make the playoffs if this continues. The Boston Bruins have given up 1,516 shots against this season, which makes them 8th in the league for shots against. Well, guess what? They're 7th in the league for giving up high danger chances. They're not playing well defensively at all in front of their goalie. When 1 or 2 players on the team are having a bad year, it's one thing. But when it's 80% of your team has an issue. I know it's a lot easier to point out one player that is driving you crazy during a game, but right now, besides David Pastrnak, this whole team is struggling and it's not getting any better. Right now, the Bruins are posed to get the top 15 pick in the upcoming NHL entry draft. If they decide to move on from their expiring contracts and start to play like the likes of Fabian Lysell and Georgi Merkulov, they could end up with a top 10 pick next year. That would accelerate things as far as a retool because the Bruins still have a strong core. The core is having a down year, and that could be understated. I feel this year's Bruins team has far too many issues to ignore, and trading assets to get better right now is not the answer because I don't believe you should reward their play. They have been one of the most successful teams in the NHL with regards to wins in the past 10 years. These glaring issues that I brought in the video can't be ignored, and I think the time for the retool is now. I want to hear from you though. After everything I've laid out for you, what do you think the chances are that they make the playoffs? And do you think the time is now to start a retool? To stay up to date on all the news surrounding the Boston Bruins, please subscribe and drop me a like. If news breaks surrounding the Boston Bruins, be sure to check out the channel. If you've already subscribed to the channel, thank you. I'll see you next time.